welcome to today's video, which will be a very exciting one. I am doing another splurge or save. You all know these are my absolute favorite videos to do. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Estee, and on my channel we discuss all things makeup, skincare, hair care, everything in the beauty realm, and sometimes clothing. So if that interests you, be sure to subscribe. It really means everything to a small YouTuber like myself. And for today's video, I am putting the L'Oreal Infallible Fresh Wear Foundation in a Powder head to head with the brand new Fenty Pro Filter Soft Matte Foundation Powder. I am super duper excited to do this. The L'Oreal Infallible has been a favorite, almost holy grail powder foundation for me. So when I saw that this was released, I was like, I need to get my hands on this. And I need to see, is it really as good as my beloved L'Oreal powder? There are quite a few differences with these powders. So first up, I'm going to talk about how they are similar. Both of these have a matte finish, and the Fenty claims to be sweat, humidity, and crease resistant. The L'Oreal also claims to be sweat and humidity resistant, but it also claims to be waterproof. Now, I do love this powder. I do think it is sweat and humidity resistant, but I have not tried it underwater, so I can't actually attest to whether this is waterproof or not. Now let's move on to the differences. There are quite a few. We'll start off with the price. So the L'Oreal Fresh Wear Foundation Powder retails for $12 to $15 depending on where you pick it up, and the Fenty Foundation Powder is $36. And you can definitely see that price difference with the packaging. Now they're both plastic, but the Fenty one is obviously more luxe, it's heavier, it feels more luxurious. It's this really awesome, cool shape. You get a mirror. So like with any high-end luxury makeup brand, the packaging is obviously gonna be much nicer. The next massive difference is the shade range. I have no good things to say about the L'Oreal shade range. They have 16 shades, and all of the shades are pretty much light to medium shades. They really don't have any deep or dark shades, and L'Oreal is such a massive, massive, massive brand. They really have no excuse for such a terrible shade range. While on the other hand, the Fenty has 50 shades, which is wild. Having 50 shades in any foundation is incredible, but the fact that Rihanna dropped 50 shades in a powder foundation is even more insane. Also, the Fenty is vegan and cruelty-free. Obviously, the L'Oreal is not cruelty-free, and I doubt it's vegan. It didn't mention that it was vegan in the claims, so I'm assuming it's not. And then as far as coverage goes, the L'Oreal is a full coverage powder foundation, whereas the Fenty is marketed as a light to full coverage foundation that is very buildable. So that is one of the main claims we are testing here today. Can it really be built up to full coverage? Because I feel like you can say medium to full buildable, but to say light to full buildable is a massive claim. I did purchase the Fenty online, so I did pick up 5 shades because obviously I could not see them in person. And these shades I have are 180, which is light with a warm undertone, 230, which is light to medium with a neutral undertone, 260, which is medium with a neutral undertone, 290, which is medium to tan with a warm olive undertone, and 300, which is medium to tan with a warm undertone. And here are swatches of all the colors together. From left to right, I have 180, 230, 260, 290, and 300. So obviously it is so incredible that they came out with 50 shades. That is just unbelievable. Obviously for me, shopping online, it was a little bit more difficult to like kind of figure out my shade, and that is why I did pick up so many. But I did want to talk about the undertones a little bit. So for my under eye shade, because I got a shade for the rest of my face and for my under eyes, because I like my under eyes a little bright, I picked up 180 and 230. Now I want to talk about 180 a little bit because this is light with a warm undertone. Usually when I buy foundations, I usually go more of like the neutral route, because sometimes warm undertones can look almost very yellow on me, whereas I like a warm undertone to look more like neutral golden, or sometimes with like that olivey undertone. So anyways, I looked at the swatches that they had put on the Sephora website, and I'm gonna pop up a picture right here because I saw 180 and 185 next to each other, and if you see in the picture, 185 looks so pink, and 185 was the neutral undertone, whereas this looked much more neutral and this was the warm undertone. So I feel like I kind of just want to talk about the undertones a little bit. I also feel like 260, I'm going to put up the swatches that I had put up before. I feel like also 260, that's a neutral undertone, but it also looks very almost peachy swatched on me. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention, because I do feel like the neutral colors I got still had that peachy undertone, whereas the warm and the olive undertone I got was very spot on and swatched as that undertone. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention is that the L'Oreal is fragranced and the Fenty is not. I do not like fragrance in my makeup and skincare because I do suffer from perioral dermatitis, and a lot of the times fragrance does irritate that. I will mention that the L'Oreal is a favorite of mine and the fragrance in here does not irritate my perioral dermatitis, but I definitely want to give you all a heads up that that is another difference between the two. All right, and without further ado, let's get into this demo footage. Before we get started, I do want to mention that I am not wearing any primer. Anytime I test out a foundation for the first time, I do not wear primer, I don't wear setting spray, nothing like that, because I really like to just test the foundation how it is on its own. I also want to mention that I will be using the same tools for the different side of my faces. For the foundation all over, I'll be using the IT Cosmetics 211 brush. This is my favorite for powder foundation. Now, both foundations do come with a sponge, but my preferred way of applying foundation is always with these very big fluffy brushes. I like to buff the foundation around my face, and then if there's any spots that I need more coverage, I'll go in with the sponges that came with both foundations. And I am going to be using a lighter foundation color for my under eyes, so I have two under eye brushes to use as well. I'm using the Morphe E48 and the Morphe R13. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close. I'm going to start with this side of my face, which as you can see needs a little bit more help and a little bit more coverage. And I'm going to be going into the Fenty foundations because these say light to full, buildable, so we're really going to test out if that is true. I have shades 290 and 300. I do think for this side of my face, or my face in general, 300 would probably be better. This is medium to tan with a neutral undertone, and 290 is medium to tan with a olive undertone. And I've never tried a powder foundation that has an olive undertone, so I think I'm gonna go in with this first, and then if it doesn't match correctly, I'll go over it with the 300. I zoomed you guys in, and now I'm just gonna go in, swirl my big fluffy brush in here. You can see there's quite a bit of fallout, but not too much. I'm gonna tap it out. Not too much powder came off, and I'm just gonna start going in circular motions. Okay, upon first putting this on, I don't think there was much coverage. I'm gonna swirl this in, and I'm not gonna tap it out, and we will see how that works. Okay, so without tapping it out, I'm definitely getting a little bit more coverage, but I was expecting definitely much more, but like I said, it's light to full and buildable, so we're gonna keep building it up and seeing. I'm gonna zoom you guys in even further to see that this is 2 layers of the foundation just with that fluffy brush. I'm gonna go in with 1 more layer on the brush, and then I'm gonna go in with the sponge, and hopefully we can get more coverage with the sponge. So here is 3 layers. As you can see, this blemish is very much there. Foundation didn't really cover it, but as you can see, my scarring over here, I mean, it's definitely covered, but I would still say that this is a light amount of coverage after going in with 3 layers of this with the brush. So now I'm going to take the sponge. I guess I'm just going to rub it as so. As far as the color goes, I do think that this color looks good, but like I said, it's kind of really sheer to light coverage as it is right now, so it's hard to tell. So I'm really gonna get in there. That's how much I have on my sponge. And I'm just gonna go right over this pimple. I'm gonna go over this pimple, these scars over here. I'm gonna take a little bit more. I'm just gonna put it again on this pimple. Apply more over here where I need it. So here it is zoomed in. This is with a 4th layer or a 5th or a 6th layer. I did go quite heavy with the foundation on the sponge. And I mean, I would not call this full coverage. It's definitely buildable, but I don't know. I mean, as you could see, I had to build it up a lot for it to be buildable. I would still call this like a light to medium coverage because you can clearly still see my breakout over here. You can clearly see this pimple right here. It's definitely blended into the skin a little bit, but it's very apparent that it's still there. So I don't know. I think I am going to keep going. I'm going to go with my under eyes and then just kind of see what happens. For my under eyes, I'm going in with the shade 230. This is medium with a neutral undertone, and I'm just taking it on this Morphe R13 brush. Just going to swirl it in there. Okay, so this one, wow, has much more kickback. I wonder if it's just because I'm using this brush, which is much denser than that face brush that I use. So I'm just gonna go ahead and place this on my under eye. Whenever I use powder foundation, I either use a lighter shade like this, or I will go in with a normal liquid concealer before I apply the powder foundation. It just sort of depends what look I'm doing and what mood I'm in. Just gonna take a little bit more and put this on my eyelid. My eyelid has a lot of veins. Zoomed you guys in. I feel like it's looking pretty good on my under eye. I mean, you can clearly see the difference of how this looks compared to my other eye. It definitely canceled out all of the veins, and you can still see my blueness coming through a little bit, but I'm actually very surprised. I would say the coverage for my under eye with this 230 shade is looking really, really good. Since the coverage was much better with this brush for my under eye, I'm gonna take that same brush and I'm gonna use it in this 290 color. See, what's so interesting is that as I'm picking up the powder, this color is way less powdery than 230. It's so weird. Let me just put this on this pimple. Yeah, no, it's not doing anything. I wonder if it's the shade. It's not really adding any coverage. I'm gonna move on to the other side of my face with the L'Oreal powders. I may come back to this side of my face and try shade 300, but for now, I'm just going to leave it and move on. For this side of my face, I am using the L'Oreal foundation in the shade 250 Radiant Sand, which is slightly dark and it doesn't match exactly the same, but we're just gonna make it work. I'm just gonna go in the same way. I'm just going to swirl my brush. You can probably see all the powder kicking up. Tap it off a little bit, and then I'm just going to swirl it in to the skin. Swirl, buff, whatever you wanna say, and add a little bit more. I need to do my forehead, which I always neglect. So here is 2 layers of that foundation. I think it's looking really, really good. My scars here are pretty concealed. I am gonna go in with the sponge and just take just a little bit and apply a little bit right here. I'm not sure if you can see, but since I applied that, you can kind of see like the powder sitting on top of the skin. So I'm just gonna take the brush and just buff that and sort of just like push that into the skin a little bit. Now I'm gonna go in with the shade 180 Linen for my under eye. I'm just gonna pick that up. Ooh, that is so powdery. Tap it off. Apply that right on my under eye. This shade is also slightly different from the Fenty. It's slightly lighter. I'm also gonna take a little bit more and put it on my nose. I'm kind of just gonna put it on my entire nose. You can definitely see a little bit of a difference with the under eye powder just because the L'Oreal one is a little bit brighter. So obviously this under eye area is definitely looking a little bit brighter than this one. So here is how my skin is looking. On the Fenty side, I definitely need a little bit more coverage. I think I may go in with 300 and add that on, but I just want to show you the difference. So on this side, I did the 2 layers of the L'Oreal with the big fluffy powder, and then I used the little sponge to conceal a little bit. And then I did like 2-ish layers on my under eye. I used probably the same amount of the Fenty on my under eye. So the under eye, I got a lot more coverage with that 230 color. But obviously we know I went in with a lot of the Fenty 290 on this side. So now I'm gonna go in with the 300 powder with that same brush. And I'm gonna take this. See, it's so weird because this one also, there's not much kickback. There's not much like powder coming off, but it's so weird because the 230 color that I used on my under eye had like way more powder come. And I think that's probably why I got more coverage, because that one is like a softer powder, if that makes sense. And then the same thing with the L'Oreal. The L'Oreal has a ton of kickback. It's a very soft powder, but it is very finely milled. And I feel like that's why you get the coverage. But anyways, let me just put this over the areas I need more coverage and see if it sort of helps. No, it didn't really do much. I'm just being honest. Let me take the sponge and see if that will work. Okay, it's definitely layering better with the sponge. Definitely getting a little bit more coverage on those areas with the sponge. Okay, so here's how the skin's looking with the addition of the Fenty 300 color foundation. I definitely like the L'Oreal side much better. This side, I'm not gonna lie, this side of my face, not that it's looking dry or cakey, but it's looking heavy. Like you can see that I have a lot of foundation on, obviously because I put a ton more powder on this side to get to that full coverage that I needed to cover up my blemishes and cover up my hyperpigmentation. So it's very clear. I don't know if it's picking it up on camera, but in person, it's like, wow, you can definitely see that I have a lot of foundation on. Again, it does not look cakey. It's not looking dry. My skin is obviously very mattified because it is a matte powder foundation. So it's not that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about like when you look at my skin, you can tell that I am wearing a lot on my skin. It definitely looks heavy. I don't have that with the L'Oreal side, obviously, because I did not put nearly as much on the L'Oreal side. And I just think that overall, the formulations of these powders are much different. The L'Oreal powder, once you swirl it in, you get a ton of kickback. It's a much softer powder. So I feel like the brush picks it on a little bit more and it just sort of melts into the skin. Whereas the Fenty, I really had to get it in there, and it's definitely more of a packed powder. I don't even really know what the word for it is, but I really had to get in there to get a lot, and then I just had to keep going and going to get the coverage that I wanted. And I feel like the way it looks now, I did achieve the coverage that I wanted. I can still see this pimple. So yeah, at this point, I'm definitely going to say to save if you're looking for coverage. It obviously depends what you're looking for. For me personally, with all of my foundations, because I have that hyperpigmentation, because I have acne, because I have scarring, A, B, C, and D, coverage is a really big deal for me. And when I see that a foundation says light to full and that it's very buildable, I'm taking their word for it and I am going to build it up to try to get that full coverage. What I'm going to do now is finish off the rest of my makeup, and then I'm going to come back here and let you all know how the rest of the products I use layered on top, sat on top of both of these foundations. All right, so here is the finished look. If you're curious what I used on the rest of my face, on my eyes, I used the Huda Beauty Khaki Haze palette. Literally all I did was take this olive matte green shade and just put it all over my eyes. I was feeling very inspired by my green sweater. And on my lips, I'm wearing the NYX Sweet Cheek Soft Cheek Tint in the shade Nude Tude. This has been like my go-to lip color lately. It's just the best. As far as how other products layered on top of both foundations, all of the products that I used layered on really nicely, no issues. Obviously, I only applied other powder products on top. I still stand by the fact that even after putting everything on, this side definitely looks a little bit heavier, but like I said, I put on way more powder on this side, so that's kind of inevitable. I do want to quickly mention that my skin type is combination, so my T-zone gets super oily, the rest of my face is normal, and then my chin is dry as the Sahara Desert, so I kind of have every single skin type on my face. And even if you have dry skin, I feel like dry skin types tend to shy away from powder because they can obviously make your skin look much more drier and feel much more drier. You don't have to worry about either of these powders. I already knew that the L'Oreal didn't give me issues with my dry areas, but the Fenty also is not giving me any issues. It doesn't feel like dry. It's not looking cakey on my chin or anything like that. I am going to do an 8-hour wear test. So I'm going to do a 4-hour check-in and then a final check-in once I wear this for 8 hours, and I'll come back. I'll let you know my final thoughts and how this wore, because I do find that with powder foundations, the longer they stay on your skin, the more they can kind of warm up to your skin and look less powdery, less heavy, so on and so forth. So I definitely want to test and see how this will wear on my face and just look throughout the day. So I'll see you all soon at the 4-hour check-in. Hello again. We are back for the first check-in. It's been about 5 hours since I applied both foundations, and within those 5 hours, I want to say like 2 to 3.5 of them, I was wearing a mask because I just had an entire day of errands, returns, supermarket, the whole thing. So I do have the mask and I do want to show it to you. So here's the mask. This side was the L'Oreal side and this side was the Fenty side. Neither of them claim to be transfer proof, but in case you're wondering, they're definitely not transfer proof. If my makeup's looking a little jacked up right now, that's why I definitely took off some on my nose and some on my cheeks. So again, if my makeup's looking crazy, that's why. As far as how both foundations are wearing, I would say that the Fenty side is looking a tiny bit shinier than the L'Oreal side. Definitely on my forehead, you can see over there, my forehead gets very oily, and my forehead shine is definitely coming out a little bit more on the Fenty side than on the L'Oreal side. But as far as like my nose and this zone right here, hard to say with my nose because basically most of the foundation rubbed off. But over here, I would say they're pretty much the same. The only place that I really see the shine is on my forehead on the Fenty side. So yeah, that is it for my first check-in. I will check in with you all in a few hours and I will come to my conclusion whether you should splurge or save. But as of now, you can probably guess what I'll say. All right, it has been a little bit over 8 hours since I applied both of these foundations. And by now, you can probably guess that I say that you should save and go with the L'Oreal Fresh Wear Foundation in a powder. I think overall this foundation wore much better on my skin. The side that I have the Fenty on definitely got more shiny. Overall, if you're looking for an amazing powder foundation that is full coverage off the bat, 1 to 2 layers, something super duper quick, I highly, highly, highly recommend the L'Oreal Fresh Wear Foundation Powder. It is just awesome. Now there are 2 major cons. A, it includes fragrance. I do want to mention again, I said this previously, but I do have perioral dermatitis. My skin does not like fragrance products, but the fragrance in this does not irritate my skin, does not irritate my acne, does not irritate my perioral dermatitis. But I do want to mention that it is fragrance, and also the shade range on this is really, really crappy. So you may want to try this, but you may not even be able to because there's only 16 shades. And of course, there are 50 shades in the Fenty foundation, which is just amazing. I still do think that this is a great powder. I personally wouldn't really use it as a powder foundation just because for my skin, I need that coverage. I have the acne, I have the hyperpigmentation that I want to cover up. So I rather just go in with something that is full coverage right off the bat instead of, you know, building up 6, 7, 8 layers of this. But I think if you're looking for a powder foundation that's more light to medium coverage, something that's light will give your skin that even complexion and give you a little bit of coverage, this is obviously a great option. And like I said, 50 shades, it's just incredible. There's no way that you would not be able to find your shade in this. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy these splurge versus save videos, please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.